Alright then, greetings everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about a specific issue that is marijuana that I'm sure many of you are quite attentive to. And my primary claim is that the complete legalization of marijuana will cause more harm than good to society. My supporting points are: 1, the legalization of marijuana will lead to many problems with youth and students. 2, the legalization of marijuana for recreational use is detrimental to society and will lead to more harm than good. And 3 is the act of smoking cannabis in order to deliver the therapeutic elements into the body causes health problems, so better methods of dose standardizations through pharmacological research is a more promising alternative. Now on to point 1. We already know some of the negative effects associated with marijuana, such as decreased motivation, poor thought processing, and starting marijuana at a young age will lead to brain development problems in the future. My evidence for this is a publication by the American Psychological Association with noted Stacy Groves research, who is the Director of Cognitive and Clinical Neuroimaging Core at the McLean Hospital, Harvard Medical School, reported that users who began before or after 16 made twice as many mistakes on tests of executive function, which included planning, flexibility, abstract thinking, and inhibition of inappropriate responses. Another supporting point is that due to the increased accessibility of marijuana, this is a breeding ground for problems in youth, since high school students who take marijuana will not adequately succeed in the studies, leading to increases in high school dropout rates. Now, according to a study done by the Institute of Behavior and Health, among 1,168 adolescents in high school, chronic marijuana users had a high school dropout rate at 13%, non-chronic marijuana users at 5.9%, and non-marijuana smokers at a small rate of 2.1%. Now on to point 2. The legalization of marijuana for recreational use is detrimental to society and will lead to more harm than good. Now, the year that recreational marijuana was legalized in Colorado, which is in 2014, the related traffic deaths marijuana-related traffic deaths accounted for 20% of all traffic deaths in 2014, compared to only 10% in 2009. This has to do with the intoxicating effects that I already know that marijuana produces, and also due to the fact that THC or other cannabinoids in the medical marijuana plant are actually stored in the body's fat cells. So while a person may not be smoking marijuana right now, since the THC or other cannabinoids are stored in the body's fat cells, the body may metabolize that at a later point and essentially get a high without of nowhere, because the body is metabolized. It's stored in your body basically. And this is a study done by the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Report. Now, some other problems that this report has pinpointed is that in the 3 years after marijuana was legalized in Colorado, there was a 46% increase in marijuana-related emergency room visits. Reasons for this is that marijuana, since we already know, it causes a lot of mental distress in some occasions, and some of these negative side effects include psychosis, depression, mania, hallucinations, and suicidal ideation. Now, another issue that this report pinpointed is that due to the increase in cannabis products such as hemp oil, edibles, cookies, and brownies and all that sorts of stuff, children have accidentally ingested such products and needed to be hospitalized due to THC poisoning. Now, the final point that this report gave pinpointed is that the diversion of unauthorized, untaxed Colorado marijuana to other states, i.e. drug trafficking, has increased by 365%. Now my final point, the act of smoking cannabis in order to deliver the therapeutic elements into the body causes health problems, so better methods of dose standardization through pharmacological research is a more promising alternative. Now, according to the American Lung Association, smoking cannabis causes many problems to the lungs because Because whenever an individual smokes cannabis, they retain the amount of smoke in their lungs for higher amounts of time because they want to get the maximum THC absorption to get the higher high, basically. And also many other risky behaviors such as hotboxing further damage the respiratory system. And this is a study done by American Lung Association. Now, due to the vast competition amongst dispensaries, there's a large amount of marijuana products that claim to have a certain level of THC, when in reality there's no way of confirming this because the FDA does not regulate such things. Now, I believe that isolating the beneficial compounds in marijuana and processing them in a controlled manufacturing facility would allow for better control of how much active ingredient is in each unit, and also better research opportunities for pharmacological companies such as GM Pharmaceuticals in England, who have recently launched Sativex, a cannabis mouth spray which has equal parts of THC and CBH, which is formulated to treat multiple sclerosis disorder. Now, here's the final thought. You really don't see a lot of people smoking wormwood in order to get, which is where the active ingredient in aspirin is derived. So why would people smoke marijuana to get their medication into the body? Thank you.
And do you have a copy of the final draft form?
Thank you.
All right, well, the proposition's very clearly identified, and I thought you had a good preview of what the structure was going to be. It makes it easy to follow your arguments. So you're doing a good job there. I do think on the first point that your argument about how changing the laws has increased access to people underage, that should be the first part of that argument. And then the follow-up should be all of the consequences that occur from that. As it is, it feels a little bit like it's backwards. You've got the effect before the cause in that situation, and that, I think, is a little confusing. It'll flow a little bit more effectively the other direction. I do think that you do a good job presenting a lot of evidence to support your positions. The one problem that I have is that it's frequently the post-citation format that you're using. So in other words, you'll often give us material that either sounds quoted or it's paraphrasing information, and then you tell us where it came from instead of first saying according to somebody and then presenting the information. So it's sometimes tough to tell, well, is that their quote or is that your interpretation of their quote? You usually then followed up with another quote from the same organization, so we're getting like two pieces of information with the one citation in the middle, and the stuff that comes beforehand is not as distinct because it's not cited separately. So it's just a little confusing. That doesn't mean that the information's bad, it just means that it would sound a little easier to follow if you structured it a little bit differently, especially the citations. I thought you had good statistical information on several points comparing the traffic incidents, for instance, or the emergency room admissions in Colorado prior to and after the legalization process. That, of course, makes a little bit of sense. You've got to be careful about jumping on questions of causality, but those are indicators that would be used to make such inferences, and so I thought you did a good job presenting information on those particular points. The second point, you have this explanation of metabolism, and I think that that explanation needs to have a little bit more substance to it. In other words, the idea that somebody smoked marijuana 3 weeks ago, they're still metabolizing the THC in their system, and that might affect them when they're driving down the road. I need to that's an explanation that you give, and the proof on that seems a little thin. So I think you need better evidence to support that point. It may very well be that somebody was high 3 weeks ago, they still have the THC in their system, and then when they have an accident later on, we assume that the THC had some relationship there, but it might not have affected their cognitive processes at all. And that's the assumption that you seem to be making, and I think other people might simply say, well, no, we're jumping to the conclusion simply because the THC is present in their metabolic system.
What if it's actually in the report, though?
Well, then say that. The report says this could be the effect. This particular report says one of the consequences is that people could have the essence of secondary highs, or their judgment could be influenced days or weeks after having consumed the marijuana without them even realizing it. If that's a quote, tell us that. That's what you need to have. And I'd be happy to hear that, but that's not the way it was presented here. I'm not saying that isn't the way it is, but I'm telling you that's not the way it was presented here, and it needs to be. All right, and then the third point, kind of I think is an interesting point. It's not directly related to the legalization for recreational use, but it is kind of related to the use of marijuana as a delivery system for other purposes. And the criticism there is a valid one. I think to include it, we might have to change what the main proposition is a little bit so that it fits. Otherwise, I'm not sure it's relevant to the main point, unless the justification for the legalization was to increase access for medical purposes. In which case, then I think that you need to explain, for example, in places like Colorado or Washington, that was one of the main arguments that people used, in which case now your argument, I think, then becomes a little bit more relevant. And I do think that the idea that there are going to be problems as a consequence of this, I think that is a relevant argument to the use of marijuana. I'm just not sure it's relevant to the complete legalization of marijuana. I like the explanation that you have at the end. I like the little analogy. Look, we have lots of medications that are derived from a variety of plants, but we don't smoke those plants. We don't boil them up and turn them into candy. We don't use them in a variety of ways. We extract those kinds of medications and find a way to deliver them effectively. Why are we not doing this with marijuana? And then there's an argument that says using it the way that people are doing so is creating problems for them down the road. I thought that was a pretty good explanation. I'm going to give you a hard time about one term because I make a joke about it in my public speaking classes, and it's just a pronunciation thing. And I don't know if it's because there is a language issue or something here, but I've heard people say this before. Recreational drug use means that you're doing it and repeating the process later on. I'm recreating my drug use. Recreational drug use means I'm using it for recreational purposes. Recreation. Yeah, there is no word like recreation. I'm making a joke there. There is no word for recreation is not a word. Recreation is the word. It's just a pronunciation issue. Recreation. Yeah, you don't get into a recreational vehicle.
Yeah.
You get into a recreational vehicle, and that's the term that you're using. So it's not a big deal, but it's one of those things that people listening, somebody could be distracted, and I was. All right, thank you.